All right,
We got facts over.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. Public, please hold comments until the select board chairman, that's me, opens the agenda items for public comment. When addressing the board, state your full name. I will accept a motion to approve the minutes of April 7, 2025.
Move approval. Second.
All in favor?
Well, how many was that? 3?
Yeah, there are only 3 of us.
Okay.
Yeah.
New business, review and approve annual audit report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2024, prepared by James W. Wadman, CPA.
You're
All right,
on.
we're diving in. Right?
Yep.
It's like really crazy here.
It's also really warm, so I feel like we.
That's true.
It's on that.
Was it recording?
It said it was.
Yeah, it is recording
I
up there.
can't hear anything.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, Virginia. Zoom.
Making any.
Yeah, it does help.
It's not like this, of course, it was.
They sent out
Yeah,
the,
yeah,
Claire sent out the link. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's out there.
Yeah,
It's out
I
there.
just don't think that people are.
They're not, they don't appreciate.
Yeah,
As
accounting
interested
humor.
as you are.
that's okay. That's okay.
Welcome to your world.
Yes.
You know, we've had years of doing these presentations and a lot of times, especially with school systems, it seems like there's always some type of presentation before us where it's like
Mhm.
maybe some group is receiving an award, or whether it's a athletic team or something. And all this crowd is there, you know, the kids are there and the parents are there and everything, and they do that, and then the place just empties. It's like, there's nobody left for the audit presentation.
You're sitting there like
But-
this.
No, I'm teasing them like, you know, you can stick around, but.
But I just want on behalf of the board and the town, thank you, Jim, for
Yeah.
all you do.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Now we're able to.
I appreciate
Yeah.
going through it. I really like, I mean, I get audited at the high school, so then I like to, not that it's, a lot of it's, here, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
It's important.
You know, in some of the meetings we do, we were doing a meeting, presentation in Surrey yesterday, myself and one of our other CPAs. And it's always a very good interactive meeting, as is this meeting, you know, there's always a lot of discussion and so forth. And sometimes it's just kind of like you're doing the presentations and you see the people, they're looking up at the clock. And much longer is he gonna talk, you know, like, but I think it's good to do this and, you know, and go through the report. I mean, this is 91 pages.
Yeah.
You know, go through and hit some of the highlights and, you know, and be able to answer your questions and so forth, so. I mean, we were talking about earlier that May 1st is this year's presentation, last year's May 1st, and you said the year before was May 1st, so. That apparently is audit presentation day. I don't know, it's gonna hit on Sunday one of these years, though. See how that goes. So.
You can just make it to print next time. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's in there, it's not bound in, but it's fine.
So, yeah, so here we are again this year, and, we've got this nice thick report with pages and pages of required presentation materials. Well, as I say, there's very little here that is, optional disclosure, you know, I mean, the notes, I think are 30, I'm looking at 43 pages of the notes. And, you know, 23 of those pages are related to pension and other post-employment benefit disclosures. And then we get a page of budget versus actual presentation, and then we have another like 8 pages related to pension and other post-employment benefits. So that's, you know, a good 30 pages added to this report, just for
Yeah.
some disclosures that have to be there, that not the most useful information in the world, but it's required to be there for you to get your clean opinion, which, speaking of that, pages 1, 2, and 3, the opinion letters. And you have an unmodified opinion, which is a second paragraph on page 1, where we express our opinion. So it says that the accompanying financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of your governmental activities, your business type activities, which would be the Marina Fund. Each major fund and the aggregate remaining fund information as of June 30th, 2024. So again, it's an unmodified or clean opinion.
Yay.
Okay, so,
Thank you, man.
and it used to be, I may have said this to you before, if you had a 2 or 3 page opinion letter, then you had some issues. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, it used to be these opinion letters were just 1 page,
Right.
but so many things have been added to the required format over the years that now we're, even with a clean, unmodified opinion, you're getting onto a 3rd page.
Well,
So, but if we had any issues that we couldn't agree with management on, or anything that we couldn't reach an opinion on, if we had, sometimes we have to disclaim an opinion because the records aren't available for us to express an opinion on things. That would all be disclosed here, but you, again, you've got the clean opinion.
Mhm.
So then we come to pages 4 through 10. The management's discussion and analysis. That's required to be squeezed in between the opinion letter and the financial statements. And this is basically puts the financial highlights for the year into a narrative format. So it's there for a reader to go through. There are some condensed financial statements and some pie charts in here and so forth. But for the most part, it's in a narrative format, talking about your financial operating highlights for the past year. Then pages 11 and 12. Now, these financial statements are required to be the first 2 exhibits. And this is page 11 is a statement of net position. And this is the town's balance sheet. And it is, you know, all of the assets of the town, all of the liabilities and various debts of the town. And it's not on the same basis that you operate with your internal financial reporting. And to give you some major examples here, you know, we've got, you know, close to $50 million here of capital assets, the town's assets. So it's land, buildings, vehicles, large pieces of equipment. And the biggest is the infrastructure assets, which are going to be all the town-owned roads, sidewalks, parking lots, things of that nature. So those assets, of course, are not in a liquid format. And they're, for the most part, with the exception of some things like some vehicles, you know, they're only of use to the town of Mount Desert. You can't, you know, sell Sergeant Drive. I mean, probably you could actually, but it's like,
you could.
yeah, but you can't, you know, necessarily take these infrastructure assets in the buildings within the town and so forth and sell them to use for cash flow, to pay
Right.
payroll and expenses and so forth. But they are required to be exhibit of the financial statements and have been for many years. But beginning on page 13 and through the remainder of the financial statements, this reporting from page 13 through the end is on the same basis that you prepare your financial statements internally. You know, the information that comes from the finance department, the way you put your budget together and so forth. Now we're on the same basis. So you may want to make note of that, you know, this is really where it starts. This used to be where the financial statement started years ago. But it's actually been a good 20 years now that these first few exhibits have been there. The government-wide statements, exhibits A and B. So, so if we look over here at page 13, we've got balance sheet for all of your governmental funds, so that would exclude like the marina and some trust funds and so forth. But you've got the general fund in the very first column, and we follow that down to the bottom of the page under the fund balances. You have your unassigned fund balance, which is $3,637,174. So that's unassigned fund balance is the technical term. According to the Government Accounting Standards Board, you might refer to it as your surplus. when you're, you know, working on budgets and so forth. And over the years, these labels have changed. So presently it's unassigned fund balance. Maybe sometime down the road, they'll give it a new name, you know, but
Do you usually call it undesignated or is that?
exactly, yeah, we were talking about that in Surrey
Yeah.
yesterday, because they, you know, they're like, well, we've got undesignated fund balance, and like, that's what it was called for decades.
Yep.
You know, and so that's what it says in everybody's software, right? You know,
Yes.
in your,
Yeah.
you know, in your software, it's undesignated. And then they change it to unassigned, but of course, everybody still calls it undesignated in their
Yeah.
software program.
Yeah, I do.
So, and so in the handout that we gave to you, that, has this gone around so everybody has one?
Sorry, stop with me.
So,
Oh. I'm looking for it.
yeah,
Sorry.
so we've got in the handout, you know, where you folks have been for the last 3 years, and we've also got, you know, where some other towns have been for the last 3 years. You know, you've stayed pretty consistent, as you can see, from 22 to 24 in the 3.6 to 3.7 million range. In terms of dollars, and then in the 16 to 17% range as a percentage of your expenditures. The Maine Municipal Association recommends a minimum 10 to 12%. If you get down into the single digits, then, you know, you may start to have cash flow problems. When it comes to make some of those big monthly payments you have and so forth, and school payrolls and things of that nature, you know, so at 16 to 17%, you're in a healthy financial position. Now, if you look at some of these others, you know, you can see Tremont, they've been in the 14 to 16%. Bar Harbor has been in the 15 to 18%. And then we have Castine, who has operated, always maintained a relatively high surplus. I mean, I know, looking back years where they've been over 100%, their surplus, over 100% of their expenses, which means they could go a year without even sending out tax bills and still probably pay their bills fine all year long.
Yet I bet they do send out the tax bills.
They do.
Well, I'm surprised that there isn't a regulation that regulates you know, how much of a surplus a town can accumulate.
Yeah, they don't.
Yeah.
There is on the school end.
Say they do the school.
Yeah.
But for the municipalities.
Hmm.
No, and they've, you know, they purchased some real estate and so forth out of surplus this past year, which brought their surplus down. So that they're down at 65%. That's probably as low as I've seen them in the years. We've probably been doing their audit for about 15 years, and I think that's probably been the lowest I've seen them, but they're still, you know, 3.2 million for a, you know, relatively small town, so.
Jim, how come Bar Harbor is the only one where you break out with the working capital reserve?
Yeah, so they have in their charter a working capital reserve, and I think it's a percentage of their budget, I think, that they maintain.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's like $2,634,000 even.
Mhm.
You can see that looking back at the
Yeah,
years,
yeah.
it's been a kind of a round number difference. So they've got their surplus, but then they've also got a working capital reserve in Bar Harbor. So you really want to lump the two together,
Yeah,
because, you know, that working capital reserve is for cash flow purposes.
right.
You know, that's why they have it. And so that's why we lump that together with them, to have them so that they're,
Mhm.
you know, really, you know, more comparative with what
Right.
everybody else does.
Right.
So, but they've had that again, and they've had that in their charter for a number of years, that they, set that aside every year so that they don't run into cash flow problems, so.
So it's almost like an undesignated CIP.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, so. So we have this all together so that when we do their presentation in a couple weeks, it's already, you know, figures are already here, just have
Mhm.
so.
Did you change the order?
No, I don't think so. I just changed the name at the top and, you know, go down through and change a few other things, but, so. And I think when are we doing Tremonts?
Monday.
Monday, so it's probably,
Yeah,
you know,
that's ready.
yeah, and, you know, and sometimes we may change out a town or so, you know, like I don't remember if we have this same group in Tremont's presentation or not. A lot of the reason I have Castine in here is not only because they maintain a lot of surplus, so people can kind of see, you know, sometimes we might have a town that's, you know, 30% or something like that, and they're like, well, but we're not as bad as Castine, you know. And also, Castine, although they're paying it down a lot, they have a lot of debt too,
Yeah.
in terms of, they did a number of years, they've got a water and sewer department there. I mean, for a small town, there's quite a bit going on in Castine,
Yeah.
you know, they got the academy there and the school
Yeah,
and they did a big infrastructure project several years ago.
Yeah.
Where they, you know, redid all the water and sewer lines, they put all of the utility wires underground and so forth. And so they had, one time they had.
imagine that.
Good idea.
Yeah.
I've exploited a couple of our citizens. and
Yeah.
we've done-
When they got that done.
No, they, you know, a number of years ago, like I said, they've been paying it down pretty steadily, but they were up there towards the, you know, the upper end of what you're allowed to have for debt based on your state valuation. So still well below what the statutes say you can have. You can have basically, when you lump it all together, you can have a total of 15% of your state valuation, and they were still well below that, but still on the, you know, upper end as far as what we saw for government. So we put them in here for debt purposes also, as far as comparisons go.
Mhm.
So
How many towns do you do audits for?
way too many. I think, I don't think the exact count, but I think somewhere around 85.
Wow, but we're your favorites, right?
You are. So, yeah, and I think another 50 or so schools that we do,
Oh my God,
so.
Yeah.
that's a lot.
Yeah, and Kelly, like she and Juanice and Amy, the team that works on this audit, that's what they do year round.
Yeah,
They don't even get a break during tax season, like, you
No.
know, like,
No.
they do it year round,
There's no break in audit.
so.
I know, we used to have quiet time like now, May and June, and that doesn't exist anymore.
wow.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, so again, these financial statements, jumping back to them from page 13 on, are gonna, you know, run in line with your accounting system that you have here in the town office. Page 17, 18, 19 are the statements for the marina fund.
Mhm.
Right.
And they're called proprietary fund types, meaning they are like business type entities. They're supposed to be, you know, based on user fees is where the revenue comes from and so forth.
And those used to be called enterprise.
And they still are.
Yeah.
They still are kind of interchangeably. The technical term is proprietary,
Mhm.
but enterprise, you can still use that and you're still staying in line with the GASB standards. Again, pages 20 through 42. The notes to the financial statements. And I think it's safe to say, I'm sorry, 20 through 62. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's safe to say that every page, every word here is required disclosure on the accounting policies that a government follows, that the town follows. And again, like 23 pages related to the pension disclosures, all of the assumptions that are related to the Maine Public Employees Retirement System. And the same thing with the town's health insurance plans for the retirees and the health insurance plans for the school department and the life insurance. That goes with it for Maine Purse. I mean, this just added so many pages to these reports, so. So just like that, we're on page 60, so. And this is your budget versus actual operating statement for your general operating fund. You got original and final budget, slight differences, so you made some budget modifications during the year based, compared to your annual town meeting. There was some minor budget modifications made here.
The carry forwards. I was gonna say some of it's grossing stuff up to carry forward, yeah.
And the plan was to reduce your surplus by $750,000. If you look at that page, 63 we're on. And follow your budget columns down to the very bottom. And the budget was, in other words, we're gonna reduce the tax commitment by 750,000 by taking that much money out of our unassigned fund balance. Your actual column, which is the third column in, you're actually reduced your unassigned fund balance by 136,527. Everybody sees that number there beside the 750s. So you had a favorable operating variance for the year of $613,473. And it's a combination of revenues coming in above budget and expenses coming in below budget. It's roughly almost half and half. Overall revenues were $292,390 above budget. Expenses were $324,310 below budget.
Mhm.
Do you think we're too conservative on our revenues? I know I've always had that idea. I wanted to make sure that we didn't get caught by not being able to count on these amount of revenues, but I do. I'm pretty conservative. I won't be doing it again, but I'm wondering if that's a policy that we ought to look at, is maybe be a little more aggressive on some of those revenues.
So I think a lot of times I say to towns that I think they're a little too aggressive with the revenues. I wanted to flip over to pages 73 and 74, because this is where we're taking your revenues and we're putting them, in more detail. We're looking at your revenues, budget versus actual.
Yeah.
And just giving them a quick look down through. I mean, you had the environmental sustainability grant that came in. That wasn't budgeted. Okay, so if you were to back that out. And where's your investment earnings was gonna be my other guess. I mean, we've seen this pretty much across the board, that, investment earnings have improved. And so, we're pretty much always seeing favorable budget variances on investment earnings. So, I mean, if you were to back those two out, you'd be within about $40,000 or $50,000 budget versus actual.
Oh, that's great.
So, yeah.
Okay, so we're doing it.
Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
this much for.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And we'd rather be happy rather than
Yeah.
disappointed.
That's right.
Yes.
Although I think that the positive variance for our interest on investments over the next couple of years are gonna be.
No
It's
kidding.
gonna be a lot. It's not gonna be as much of a positive
Right,
variance, from what I can
right.
tell.
Yeah.
I'll throw it out there. We won't be seeing this number.
Yeah, that's gonna change.
I think it's just a 2-year.
Yep. I think so too.
Yeah.
I'm hoping we're just not gonna be under budget. That's my goal. So.
Yeah.
So the next couple pages, pages 75 and 76, so these are taking the expense side of things. And breaking them into more detail, versus just having a department, we're looking at, each of these categories. And breaking them into more detail. And we had an unfavorable variance on the revenue side for the police chief reimbursement. But then on the expense side, on the police department, of course, we've got an even bigger favorable variance for the police department. on that
Because
side.
the police chief, obviously would comes from Bar Harbor now, so
Right.
we're no longer billing Bar Harbor for
Right.
the cost of Jim Willis essentially. So
Yeah.
that revenue is no longer something that we're collecting.
Right.
So, so then looking down through these, I think, overall, you're showing good. You're showing strong budgetary control, you've got a
Yeah.
few, you've got some positives and negatives, but overall. I think your budget versus actual on the expense side looks very good. If you were to, back out the police department. And your overlay on taxes, then you'd be right on the money as far as your
Mhm.
budget versus actual expenses. Page 77 is basically statement of an unassigned fund balance. So it's where you started, where you ended, you decreased your unassigned fund balance by 136,527. The analysis of change section on the lower half of the page, shows revenues came in 289,163 above budget. Expenses were 324, 310 below budget. That nets to that 613,000 favorable variance, but then you use $750,000 to reduce taxes.
Mhm.
So that's your kind of a summation of that account. For the year, and then we've got other funds, reserve funds. You know. Trust funds and so forth. I don't really have anything to mention on these.
Lots of capital projects.
Yeah,
stuff.
your
Yeah.
CIP funds. Broken down into detail there at the end, pages 88. Trust funds at the very end, the very last page, schedule of expenditures of federal awards. And I may mention this to you every year, this normally wouldn't have to be here, but the State Department of Education requires that we insert this exhibit for their purposes. I think for pulling together their financials and their audits, at the state level. So normally you wouldn't have this page unless you expended over $750,000 of federal funds. But the Department of Education requires it, even if we have a school system that has zero in federal funds, we still have to put this page in here with zero. Obviously, they have to check a box when, they take the audits in. But this past year, the town, which includes a school department, expended $263,876 of federal funds, so.
Mhm.
And you guys didn't get one of these electric buses? We did.
No.
No,
We're finding out in the last couple of days that there was some. Through this school system down here on the island, that there were some electric buses
oh, yeah.
purchased with EPA grants. And
They never told us.
they were never recorded on the financial records.
Our electric buses have been broken down more than they've been.
So
working,
ours.
So.
Yeah.
That's great.
And speaking of Castine, they were gonna get one. They got an EPA grant. And I can't believe how much these buses cost.
It's insane.
How much they
They're
cost?
they're over $300,000
$170,000.
for one bus. I mean, a diesel bus is like
I wouldn't say it's-
120,000.
It's double.
And,
Jeez.
and,
Yeah,
And they're not reliable.
no,
They're not.
absolutely not.
Not
And
as
especially
good as
for
common.
us. We can't take our electric bus to Presque Isle or Caribou or Holton
Right.
or Hardly Bay.
No, it's not meant. for
Island
that.
of Maine.
No.
and so,
HPPC, that's about our,
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
They're not meant for
Yeah.
that.
but
so yeah, so that's, that's federal money and that's federal expenditure. So now, some of these school systems, federal expenditures, we're finding out in the last 2 days have doubled because we basically stumbled across this with, Warnice was looking at some insurance policies and like, what is this bus, and like, oh, that's our electric bus. And it just all flowed directly through the EPA.
Oh, I see.
Mm.
Yeah.
It never got recorded in their accounting records. And so now we're evaluating some of these federal compliance audits that we have to do in the event that they expend more than $750,000 of federal funds, because the expenditures just double with this bus.
That's really,
Yeah.
Single audit.
So,
I know, all that money's gonna go away.
Yeah, yeah, we're not worried about that. Worry about any buses,
Yeah.
electric buses or.
Yeah, I don't think so.
over to Castine, they got the money, and then they decided they didn't wanna get the bus. Because they found out the buses don't work, so now they gotta send the money back,
Oy.
and they bought a charger for
Oh,
$25,000.
That's another whole piece.
Now they are trying to
Electric charger.
find a new home for, trying to find somebody to buy it.
Florida, they bought some fire trucks and one of the storms came through and it set the batteries on fire.
Oh, yeah.
The fire trucks burned.
Yeah, yeah.
That's sort of an irony.
Burned while being covered in water, yeah. Awesome.
They called to put it out.
That was a horror show, that must have been. Catching fire, you just
Yeah.
make the sign.
Last than the should.
Mhm.
So that's everything I got. How about Kelly, what do you have, you wanna add?
Everything went good this year. I mean, we waited on the school as
Yeah.
usual, so. There's not much, we can't really control it at this point, so.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, the school system here isn't the only system that we deal with these delays, we're having the same conversation in Surrey
Mhm.
yesterday, that superintendent's office, which is located in Blue Hill,
Oh.
they're behind, and, there's one in, the office down in Machias is even further behind, so you've got several schools and towns out of that system that they all want and need their audits, and
What do you think, what is the reason? Is it manpower? We don't have enough accounting manpower?
I think it's a combination of that.
Yeah.
Um,
No one's going into accounting.
And
yeah,
grant-
the
and
whole
grants.
profession,
Yeah.
for accounting and even auditing,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
is, going,
Are there even any high schools that have an accounting class?
They got rid of, most of the high school
Yeah.
got rid of all the business courses.
Along
Yeah.
with them.
And also you said it's more complicated now too. With all
Yeah.
this.
Things have gotten more complex.
They had a
Yeah.
lot, the schools had a lot of
Yeah.
grants coming at them at once.
Yeah.
With the COVID
Yeah.
grants.
Yeah.
So,
Between the
Yeah, that's
COVID
right.
and, just a lot of reporting requirements.
mhm.
Um,
That bogged them down.
Yeah.
They did have staffing change this year.
That's
which-
true. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not something inherent in the management structure of the school system itself. It's the
Yeah.
fact that we just don't have enough hands on deck to handle it.
that's it, yeah,
Yeah.
and, your finance director for the superintendent's office is
Mhm.
extremely qualified.
Yeah.
Very,
Very
very qualified. What's
Was that
that?
summer cast or who is the finance director?
Nancy
Nancy
Thurlow.
Thurlow.
Oh, it's Nancy, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, the conclusion we did the League of Towns meeting, was it about a year ago we did that, Kelly and I, and
Yeah.
and Daryl and you were there, and people there from all the towns, and some of the islands were zooming in and so forth, and we were talking about it, and, really came to the conclusion that Nancy, like I said, extremely qualified, but really putting too much time in doing day-to-day
Yeah.
She's still doing
processes
Not
that
enough help.
someone else needs to be doing, and
warrants that she should.
yeah. Someone else needs to be doing that, and she needs to be supervising them and getting these books closed and ready for audit, and so that was the game
She
plan.
takes care of all the grants.
Keeping up with
Hmm.
all the changes and the new requests and referrals and like,
Mm.
the
and you
state's
don't
requesting
hire
so
new
many.
people, or to have new positions. So it's,
Or the people they hire have got no
right.
experience.
And you have
I
to
mean,
train
Yeah.
from the bare essentials.
Yeah.
We're running it, our guidance administrative assistant is leaving at the end of the year. And they wanted me to apply for that because that's a lot of school knowledge.
Mhm.
But I've been doing the bookkeeping at the high school for 24 years. And they're like, well. And I'm like, I can't do two jobs. I'm already doing more than one job.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking like, could I take on this and then train someone to do this? And I'm too old. I don't want to learn new stuff.
Um,
So I don't know what's gonna happen.
I just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you guys over the years. So,
Yeah,
Very nice
we
to
had
meet
some
you.
tough times at the beginning.
Oh,
remember?
definitely, yes.
But we've gone through that now and we're very pleased with, I think, with May and Jake and Kathy before Jake. And
Yeah.
so, things have been going very nicely and I'm confident they'll continue. I will miss this. I don't know if I'll miss the audit meetings. I don't want to be too sentimental.
Say hi.
But I will.
Public meetings.
Right.
I know, but it has been a pleasure.
Yes, I
Thanks,
agree,
Mike.
yes,
Thank you,
absolutely.
though.
Always tried to,
Yeah.
I think we've worked together well. I think there's been a whole lot of
Yeah, yeah,
friction and things like
yeah,
that.
and we did, like I said, there were some rocky times where the
Mhm.
management letters were
Oh, that was
Yeah.
very, multiple pages, multiple.
like 43, I think we had 43.
No, there was
pages.
lots of clean, yeah.
Yeah.
There was.
Really,
Yeah.
it took Kathy, I think 3 or 4 years to go through and actually get those down.
4 or 5, I thought.
Yeah, well, it was wild, yeah, absolutely. I was probably being optimistic, but it was a real battle, but I'm so glad that those days are behind us.
Yes,
Definitely.
You know.
Hopefully we can
Didn't-
continue
didn't
that.
she work for
Yeah.
you before? Is that right?
Kathy, no, but she, she's worked in municipalities, so.
That's-
And we've done that a lot over the years. It's like we find someone working in a municipality that's just like a crackerjack, and it's like, well, like, are you interested in helping out some other governments? And, she was always interested in doing that,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many different governments she's.
She did a lot.
She's been in a bunch since she left here, since she retired here, she's been in
Yeah.
a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And I'm working at the school department quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's good for her.
Yeah, so.
Do we need a motion or anything to, I don't know, accept or?
Seems like you
approve?
usually do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I move we accept the audit as presented.
I second
Thanks.
that.
Yeah,
All in favor? Thank you.
This is good. This is very
yeah,
good.
this is great.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You.
Here, I'll go. Hopefully next year.
So,
Maybe
I
in a
have to-
couple of years.
I have to open this up for public comment.
Nobody.
Any crickets?
No comment.
Other business,
Other business,
adjournment, take a motion,
so move.
Second.
all in favor, awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Good to see you guys.